So I got a little section of ryegrass over here that received some damage last season from some fungus and also from the drought that we had and just how intense things were and actually continue to be with not much rain so far. I'm actually very surprised. I'll see if I can find a photo of what this looked like at the worst part of last August or so. So I wanted to see how it recovered, but I knew I'd have to do a few fixes in the spring. Things like this right here. Just some patchiness, and that's where some of the grass actually died off. So today I'm going to show you a fairly easy method, maybe not easy on your muscles, but a fairly easy method to fix this using aeration and overseeding. So let's preface this right away too. For cool season grasses, overseeding is a pretty good way to fix things. If you have a warm season grass, most of the time you're not going to be overseeding because those grasses spread and they're pretty aggressive once you start taking care of them. So for the most part, those need to be fertilized and taken care of in the summertime. Let them all start to spread out and cover your ground. But for us here that utilize seed like cool season grasses, this stuff right here is not going to spread out enough to fix all of these little spots that have been damaged. Step one, I am going to mow this down basically as short as I can get it. Luckily for me, this wasn't at about 3 inches or anything like that, so I'm going to be able to cut this down pretty low fairly easily. If you are at that type of height, you might have to add one more step in here, which I'll talk about in a second after I get this mowed down. Set your mower as low as it can go and still get through the grass. Very likely it's not going to look very good if you had a taller lawn, but have no fear, we're about to fix it, so don't fret about that. Next step is optional, but if you happen to have access to a dethatcher or you can rent one, if you feel like your lawn is pretty thick with a bunch of just material, then it would probably be a good idea to do this, but it's not 100% required. So I just took out my little dethatcher that I have just to see what things are looking like through here. I'm not really pulling out a whole bunch of stuff, so I don't think this process for me is required today. I do have a rake that I'm going to rake through just some of those dead sections, try to get some of that dead material out of there. But other than that, I don't think the whole area needs anything. Also, you don't have to have a dethatcher. You could use a rake like this if you happen to have one. It's just obviously going to be a lot more muscle power and work for a larger area. But if you have something small, and stepping all that up, coming through and getting that dead material out of there is going to help make sure that you have your soil exposed so the seed will go down to here. This next step is where the muscle comes in. This is not something that you're able to handle yourself. You can either hire someone to do it, usually not too expensive, or if you are able to do it and you want to go get a machine. In the past, I have just gone and rented an aerator from Home Depot, something like that. Usually not too expensive for a few hours to get it home, get the work done, and bring it back. So I happen to own an aerator, so I'm going to be using that today. And also this style that is the more of the reciprocating style, which actually goes down and punches holes in instead of rolling along and getting holes punched, is a lot easier on the body. So if you happen to be able to find a rental of one of those, that is the best option I have found. As far as how easy it is to operate, I feel like the ones that roll maybe get slightly deeper core, but not too much of a difference. So the reason that we're going to aerate is so that we can pull up a bunch of cores on top of the surface. And then today I'm probably going to use a drag to drag those along and try to break them up and put them back down on top of the soil. This again is not fully required by any means, but because I want to keep mowing this fairly low, I want to try to get it smoothed out, and that'll be just a slight top dressing for this. And also it will allow me to accelerate and start to mow this fairly quickly once the germination happens on the ryegrass. But that's not required. You can leave the cores on top, put the seed over top of it, and then just let them start to break down after you start watering, after it rains. They're going to start to just kind of disintegrate on there and on top of the seed a little bit too, to give you a top dressing and get all that seed to grow in nicely. And if you do this yourself, or if you hire someone to do it, make sure that you do a double pass. So that's going in one direction and then maybe perpendicular to that, just to make sure you're pulling as many cores as you possibly can. The ground cannot be super hard or you're not going to have very good luck. So it either needs to be irrigated, or you need to pick a time when you can get some rainfall on it and then get out there so you can pull some cores. Okay, aeration double pass is done, even though with that aerator it's very nice because it has a variable speed, so the slower that you go, the more holes that it's punching in there. And so if I go pretty slow on the first pass through there, I can get a lot of holes punched already. But I did do one more pass just in another direction. And then I also did a quick drag on this. Now this again is an optional step. You can certainly just leave the cores on there and let them break down, but I'm trying to accelerate the process because I want to get back to mowing this fairly soon if I can. And so that just kind of breaks things up, puts just a little bit of that material back down into some of those holes so they're not so deep. And that worked really well because if you see, this was a full core here, and basically the only thing left up top is just the root system that was there and a little bit of thatch. This is all just going to eventually break down up on top of here, and the next time that I come through and mow too, it's going to chop some of this stuff up. Very happy with that. You don't want to let them dry out too long though, because I've found in other areas if they get too dry and you try to drag them with anything, then they're just hard as a rock, and it just doesn't do much good at that point. So I'm going to be overseeding my elite perennial ryegrass on here. This is a ryegrass plot, so this will be the same type of thing, same look and everything. So I love ryegrass, absolutely my favorite grass type by far. If you've been watching for a while, you already know that. Today I'm probably going to put about 5 pounds per thousand on here. So this is 3,000 square feet, so somewhere around 15 pounds. If you've never done this before, you can certainly measure that out and actually put 15 pounds into here and just start slow with your rate. You don't need to have a specific setting on your spreader, just start really low to where it's flowing out nicely, but it's not coming out too heavily, and you look down in your hopper and you see it really moving quickly. If you want it to go slow, it'd be better to go multiple passes in multiple directions and do it slow than it would be to dump it all on half of it and then realize you put down too much. If you've never done it before, definitely you can measure it out, weigh it out, and put it in here and start slow. And I'm going to start pretty slow today too and walk in multiple directions just to make sure that I get even coverage on everything. After you put down your seed, you could put down a top dressing if you would like to, which is simply a light material over top of all of this just to make sure that the seed is covered just slightly. But as I said, when you have all these cores up top here and you start watering, that's going to start to break down. It's going to fall on top of that seed that's laying right there, and that's going to do just fine to hold everything in place. You might lose a little bit to some birds, you might lose a little here and there, but for the most part, I've done this process many times just with aeration, not even breaking down the cores, and just putting the ryegrass seed out there and then starting watering, and it will work for you. So before we get to the watering portion, I'm going to put down a starter fertilizer. This is one right here that is safe for seeding. This is going to help to prevent some weeds that may come in early spring here. The crabgrass is going to be starting to germinate soon as far as soil temps go, so this is going to help to fight off some of that as things grow in. You can't use any other weed control, just mesotrione, which is the active ingredient in here. Now I had a couple of weeds that were already in place, and if those are already growing, it's not going to do anything for those. Those have already emerged out of the ground. So the only way that we could do anything with those is use the liquid form of mesotrione to spray over the whole thing. But I don't have enough weeds out here that I'm concerned about that and getting out my sprayer today and doing that whole process. I would rather get the grass growing really well, and we can do any sort of post-emergent, which means after the weeds have emerged, we can do a spray in early summer to take care of some of that stuff, but I'd rather get the grass growing in well right now. Basically same concept here too as the seeding with this. I don't have a setting on this bag, so I know that it says that the whole bag covers 4,000 square feet, and so I've got 3,000 square feet here, so I need about 3/4 of the bag. Or same process then, so I'm just going to set this to a low setting where I'm still getting good flow, but if I have to go over it multiple times, then that would be better than, again, putting out too much in one spot. The last step now would be to keep things watered. It's going to depend on your soil type, your weather, your wind, all of these things as to how quickly it's going to dry out. Keeping it from drying out as much as possible is the main goal here. If you need to do some timers and sprinklers and something to automate that, you can get that done too, where you can set it and still be able to be gone for the day and have it running kind of an automatic system if you don't have irrigation. I have irrigation on this plot, so I'm gonna set my timers to water it probably 3 times a day maybe. I'll keep track of it and see how much it dries out, but it's a little easier too when you have grass already there, because that's gonna help to hold some of the moisture in place. When you're doing a full renovation and you have bare soil there, it gets to be more difficult in terms of drying out, but this shouldn't be quite as hard. Water it at least a few times a day here for the first couple weeks if you can, or until the germination starts, whenever that's gonna be. And on ryegrass, it's typically pretty fast. We are in the springtime right now, so it's gonna be a little slower than if you plant in the fall when the soil temps are already very high. I'm approaching now, getting close to about 60 for soil temps. As I said, the weather is warming coming up and it should be growing in fairly quickly. So all in today is about a 2.5 hour process. Of course, I've done this a few times, so I know that for the beginners it's gonna take a bit longer, but I just wanted to show you that it's not something that you can't handle. I fully believe that you can do it. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.